Well, hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Martial Art Madness. Well, I'm going to do 3 book reviews today, all on the subject of Goju Karate. I've selected these 3 books for different reasons. One is because one of the books is one of the first books to be published on Goju Karate in the United States of America, and that is Peter Urban's The Karate Dojo, Traditions and Tales of a Martial Art. And so I'm going to go ahead and review this one first. Published in 1966 by Peter Urban. Peter Urban's considered the founder of Goju Karate in the United States, also known as Goju USA or American Goju. And my first encounter of Goju Karate actually was in like 1978 time frame. I was studying Tun-Soo-Do at the time, and some American Goju Karate people came to our school, and we were there with them and some Isshin-Ryu Karate people, and we had one of those times together where we all got together, shared techniques. It wasn't really a seminar, it was a regular karate class, and then did some light sparring with each other. And so that was my first introduction, and they had these black karate gis with their Goju fist with the USA, Goju USA underneath it. And got to share ideas and work out with them. That was my first introduction to Goju Karate. My next introduction would come in 1980-81 time frame. I would take it in the summer at the YMCA. YMCA was a satellite dojo of Turo Chinen, who had a primary dojo on the what was considered the east side of town, just as you're going up the hill to the South Hill area. And Chinen didn't teach there. Sometimes he showed up, but his black belts would often teach there. And I'd gone there because the time I was taking Isshin-Ryu Karate, and that was on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and this was Monday and Wednesday evenings. And I thought, well, I'll get a whole bunch of karate in this way. And I had been in Tun-Soo-Do, but it was so far out for me to go to. And my mom had moved a lot, and so now I was taking Isshin-Ryu, and I was supplementing that with Goju Karate. And so I trained there for that summer, and just as fate would have it, a person I knew as a child, Nabja Lunkin, was taking it there at the time. She would go on to get her black belt under Chinen, and I'll show you some more connections there. And she'd go to study at the primary dojo at a certain point in her career, as I went off and participated more in the Isshin-Ryu Karate at the time. And it was kind of neat because the YMCA at the time, it's now no longer there, was in the downtown Riverfront Park area. So on the really nice days, we'd go outside and practice. And it was just really a great experience, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought they were really strong and tough. Turo Chinen came from Okinawa, and he would show up every once in a while. He's this smaller man. And this is what will really become interesting. Well, at the same time period, one of my best childhood friends, or teenage friends anyways, Tim Kidd, love him to death to this day. He lived on that east side area. And we finally became friends to where we were going to each other's homes. And I think I lived about 2-3 miles away, but back then there was nothing to walk to his place, to his house. And so I walked up there one time, and lo and behold, I see all these karate practitioners out in their gi pants with their belts on and just a t-shirt or a tank top doing yard work and garden work in this yard. And who comes out? Turo Chinen. And it was like a regular Miyagi, which is so funny is that when the Karate Kid would come out in the summer of '84, I had gone to see it. It was Friday night, I believe, on a date. That Saturday, I thought, boy, it was a great movie. I did think the martial arts choreography was limited, but I thought it's just a great story. And I grabbed Tim. I says, you got to come see this. And one reason I wanted to see it is because Mr. Miyagi in the movie reminded me of Turo Chinen. You know, Turo Chinen was bald or had real short cropped hair, kind of like I do. But, you know, and sure enough, we're sitting there watching it, and Tim looks at me and says, it's Chinen, because Chinen was his neighbor. And we used to see students all the time painting fences and moving statuettes in the yard and working in the garden. It was outstanding. So just these kind of neat little connections that were coming at this time. And one of the easiest books to get a hold of at the time, because back then, you had Walden's books and you had, I think it was called Riley's books, and were really the primary bookstores at the time. So when you saw a martial art book, I'd get it. I'd often go to a place called Bobo's bookstores in Spokane at the time. And it was right off of Mission, because he had used books and used martial art magazines, and I bought them like crazy. Well, this is not the original one, but I got the Karate Dojo and read it. And so what's so great about this book is that it was an introduction, not only into Goju Karate, but it's really just an introduction into karate without being a primer. What do I mean by that? Most martial art books, especially at that time that were popular and selling, just showing you how to throw a punch, a block, a kick, maybe some self-defense techniques, very little wording, maybe a description of what to do. But I was already taking karate. It started in 1977. This was about 1981 time frame. I've been in it for 4 years. Once in a while you would see something in a book or a magazine that you go, oh, that's different, and you could adapt that. But largely speaking, you're learning that. So I really liked, and I like to read anyways, things that were more descriptive about either strategy or philosophy or procedures or some insight. And this book, while small, provided that, because it's not a primer. It doesn't go through how to do this technique or do that technique. And it's really divided into 2 sections: traditions and tales, stories about martial artists. And so I found this just to be really fascinating. And what was also fascinating is that you find out that Yamaguchi, the cat Yamaguchi, is his teacher, who had been prevalent in many martial art magazines at the time, of being under waterfalls and these legendary tales of this small man of about a little over 5 feet, 150, 160 pounds, who would take on a tiger. And that would happen when he was captured to a Russian concentration camp, and they sent a tiger in to kill him. And he defeats the tiger. And they're so amazed that they decide to take karate from him. So it's an interesting story where they are the ones in charge, and yet now they're his students and he's their sensei. So just a unique story. When you get really down to what took place in it. And that story's in the tell section. But I always really admired more of the tradition section. I found that much more helpful in my journey. And so I'm going to go over, I always like the illustrations in here as well. Here are some of the illustrations. Just really nice contour lines. And you have this bald martial artist. And with each of these, there is some sort of quote. The karate philosophy of calmness and confidence is the antithesis of aggression and inhumanity. Or a good karate man develops first all his katas to perfection, then broadens his character accordingly. And that one was always a tough one for me, because I'm not necessarily a great kata person. Even to this day, I'm not. For my 8th dan and Kido Kimiru, the only thing I do was perfect a kata I hadn't learned yet from a different style. Just for Soki Briggs could make me push myself, because even at this time, I mean, I've done what I need to do to make rank with katas, but I'm not a great kata person. And but it's a good quote because you learn something from that insight. It has broadened me and deepened me as I get older in particular. It also had pictures in here, so it's a mixture of both. And it's got famous pictures with him and Yamaguchi. Let me find one in here. Right there. Maybe you can see that one. And these stories, he goes through the dojo kuns, or virtues of karate in the book. And I always found those to be helpful. So when I had taken Goju, here's some more pictures I'll just show briefly. We'd open up with the Dojo Kun, and I always thought these were important. But since this was an Okinawan Goju, not a Goju USA, it was a little bit different. And I'm going to bring up one of those ones that is different here. But I'm going to read 5 of these that are in this book. We are proud to study the spirit of Goju. We shall practice courtesy. We shall be quick to seize opportunity. We shall always practice patience. We shall always keep the fighting spirit of karate. And all those have been very, very important to me, even more so as I age. And I find, like in this world, number 2, we shall practice courtesy. We are in a discourteous world, especially, and the more we progress, the less courteous we really are. And that really helped me out when I was in the military, practicing that virtue. We shall be quick to seize opportunity. There are so many people who are woulda, coulda, shoulda people. They never seized an opportunity that was right there. And I've hopefully seized appropriate opportunities. I mean, some opportunities are not necessarily always good, but look at the evidence, make a decision, and then go for it. And then practice patience. That is something that I think I want to be good at, but I'm not always good at. And I think in the martial arts, it's really important that when we're teaching, we have to remember it's taken us years to get certain things down. Some of them we're still working on. Yet, us who do seminars and have dojos, we can teach somebody, and then we expect that they have it down like that. Interesting, I heard a theologian say one time he was pastoring a church, and he couldn't understand why his parishioners weren't getting this message, this idea that he had preached. And he was speaking to his mentor, and his mentor told him, you know, how can you expect them to get it off one sermon on a Sunday when it took you 10 years of study to understand it? And it's good advice, especially for us in the karate world, because I've seen a lot of black belts get really frustrated with beginners who are not quite understanding a technique, and then you look back and they didn't get it right the first time either. Or they had a different technique that they're still working on, and they've been in for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. So, but the other one that we had often said in that class that summer was not to be boastful or modest. And the idea that I always took from that was this idea that if we were boastful, we're prideful, that we have no humility to learn. And then we're also probably stretching the truth, or we're bringing a narcissistic view just to us. But if we're overly modest, we're not being truthful. If we're good at something, or if we can help somebody at something, we should just state the facts, state the truth about it. And that's always been a very good barometer, I think, to live by in the karate world. So one of the things we see in the karate world is people who overly boast all the time about things that are obviously, I've been making fun of in some previous videos, if you've seen, things they just can't do. But even if you can do it, there's no need to boast about it. But if it comes out, it's good to be honest about what you can and can't do. And that leaves room for humility to learn, I think. So anyways, the first half I found to be very, very good, and I've always gone back to it and reread it many, many times throughout my life. The reason why I don't have the original anymore is because what I've often done, as I have extra the Karate Dojo books, I've given them out to students or friends or people I run into who ask me questions about karate. And it's still to this day, 58 years later or so, it's still a very good book, just to give a brief introduction about the traditions of karate. And it is a period piece. It was written then, but I think it still works fairly well, especially for us who are in the more traditional camp. And then the tales are nice, and I think young people enjoy the tales more than probably older people, but they're nice and something to read about and put our imagination into the context and into the story at the time. So I highly recommend the Karate Dojo by Peter Urban. Interesting enough, there is a podcast I listen to it occasionally called Everyday Martial Artist, and he quite often asks his guests, I think almost always asks guests, what's their favorite martial art book? And the Karate Dojo comes up a lot. And I think that's pretty interesting. It comes up quite often. And I think it's because it's not a primer. So for people who are in the martial arts, who've not learned everything, but they're looking for something a little bit more in depth. And I think also for me, when I reread it, it takes me back 40 years. It really does. And it also can keep me grounded about what's the purpose of what we're really trying to do. So the Karate Dojo by Peter Urban, Traditions and Tales of a Martial Art. That's the first Goju book, and I think it's really seminal for American martial arts, particularly American karate, and extremely specifically Goju karate.